Hey guys, so I'm at the beach and I kind of feel the need to preamble this next video a little bit because I'm fucking on one, and it might not make sense why I'm on one, and I guess just to say that I am responding to something. This started for me about 3 years ago. I was at this event with Charles Eisenstein, who I love, who's amazing, and we were having some of those beautiful conversations where we talk about what our hopes are for the future, for what we want for the world and for our children and our children's children. And people were saying some really good ideas, and then all of a sudden someone said, what we need is a culture where all of these good ideas are just a part of that culture. And everyone said, yes, yes, a culture, a culture. And someone said, yes, and a community that enforces that culture. And everyone said, yes, yes, a community that enforces that culture. And to me, the entire conversation got usurped. And all of a sudden, people started talking in praise of culture and about how in the old days we used to know how to do this and about how we need to bring those old ways back. And it triggered the fuck out of me because I have a lot of ideas about the ways that we project perfection onto past cultures, and certainly about how we create this idea of culture as a solution. And I'm totally open to the idea that these people just had very different associations with the word culture than I do, and that they meant something very different by it. But all I have are my associations, and getting so triggered about it really helped me clarify what those associations and what my real beef with culture is. And hopefully in bringing my wood to burn around the issue and in working through a lot of my sticky points and difficulties around this idea of culture, hopefully we can bring more awareness to what it is that we're really talking about, what we really want, and what we're really calling for. So I'm on one basically because I have a lot of passion and a lot of ideas about it, and it felt really good for me to get it out there instead of keeping it in, and it's definitely ranty. So, sorry about that, but hey, what's the internet for? And hopefully, sometimes you got to be against things to find out what you are for. And I'm really thankful to have this place and this opportunity to do that. And I really do hope for myself that as these videos continue and as I get some of my just kind of like ideas out there, that something really beautiful and more artistic blossoms from it. So that's what I'm intending and hoping for myself, and maybe you even like this video a little bit. I hope so. Alright, thanks so much. A lot of my ideas and feelings about culture come from my childhood, having grown up really intensely indoctrinated into a far-left political activist culture, and from my experiences working and living abroad, partly as an anthropologist. And I'll tell you, if you ever want to become disillusioned with culture, the only thing you need to do is live in a village for any length of time and talk to the people there, especially young people. Like Nepal is haunted by the ghosts of teenage girls who killed themselves because they were in arranged marriages with usually much older, abusive husbands and didn't see any other way out. They have this practice of all sleeping together in a collective bed, all the families. And when I first heard that, I thought that was so sweet. And still I started talking to women who said that that's where they were molested by their uncles and their fathers. And I mean, the caste system, for fuck's sake. And my intention here is not to judge other cultures, but to point to people's own dissatisfaction, restlessness, and often pain incurred by the restrictions of their given cultural institution. That's why, just as the same as we want to support people who want to preserve their culture, we must also support people who want to evolve their culture. They're the ones who know what to do and how it should be done, because they're the ones who are experiencing the limitations of their culture as limitations. I mean, what if you're born in a really hardcore culture and you're born gay, or you want to lead a mystical life, or you want to be educated, but the real thing isn't done even so much where we can point outside to people's like rights, but it's also done inside in terms of structuring the way that we think, so that all of this globalization, all of this ability to see the cultures of the other are at least making us aware that something exists called culture, and giving us the opportunity to think outside of the bounds that it's set for us. And here's where I'm biased, just because if you're tracking the evolution of consciousness, I do believe that we were made to move out of culture to individualism, so that instead of being a tribe, the unit of consciousness becomes the individual, and an individual themselves is walking around almost as an entire country, almost as an entire peoples of one that has its own aesthetic practicals, rituals, and way of seeing and experiencing and living in the world that then gets to be shared as we interact on a person-to-person level instead of on a culture-to-culture level. And people want to look back to these other cultures around the world, or they want to come up with an idea that we just need to create a better culture out of dissatisfaction of the current consumo materialistic culture that exists in the West of fucking Instagram and Monsanto and shit like that. But they forget that that is also itself a culture, and that the answer to one culture cannot be the institution of another culture. And this idea that like we can somehow come up with a culture that's going to take care of the elderly and show us how to educate our children and ensure that we all like live with respect to the natural world. I mean, I just call bullshit. I mean, to me, this is just a sloppy shorthand that inadvertently retranscribes all of the ideological patterning of the previous era that led to all of the problems that we're seeking to respond to in the first place. We really need to investigate what the fuck it is that we're talking about when we say this. What do we mean when we say culture and we get all misty-eyed about it? Do we mean belonging? Is it just some like unexamined nostalgia? Is it ecological resource accountability? Do we just want less people in the world? I mean, whatever it is that you investigate when you ask yourself what you mean when you say culture, I am sure whatever it is can exist apart from any sort of need to re-indoctrinate ourselves into a sense of traditionalism and socially enforced role division that is inherently regressive. To me, this is the same as when we say community, and that what we want and what we need is community. And all of a sudden, it's like evoking this magic word that taps into all of our existential longing and desire for love and goodness and purity and ease. This abracadabra of the word glosses over how specific and strenuous the actual process of working to build community is, or even puts it in this place where working towards community is seen as working towards a static goal, where it's a state we can achieve and we'll know it when we're there, and then once we're there, we're good, and the process stops. And this isn't the way anything works, right? Community is a process that we can only enact as a verb by engaging in understanding our needs and desires beneath the misty-eyed veneer of these words, in order to be in touch enough with ourselves to have the relationship and communication process that is involved in creating the community and adjusting to change that is the nature and flow of time. When we dissolve the pathways and hard rules of culture, we must rely on the individual character of our relationships. If we live in a world where divorce exists, we need to have a good marriage. If we live in a world where we have options about how to educate our kids, we need to be thoughtful about how to educate our kids. What it means is that instead of it just being a given, that when your parents get old, they live with you, it means that you need to enter into the flow of relationship. You need to have those difficult conversations about what's best for you and what's best for them and what your options are. You need to build a relationship that's specific and based on the circumstances before you. You don't have a cultural convention to rely upon. And instead of this being a tragedy, I think it might be a huge gift. Because in the old system of culture, you might have an elder that's wise, you might have an elder that's really not wise. And what happens when we're empowered to respond to our specific context means that we get to find our own inner elders and our own inner wisdom. We get to be accountable for our own relationships and to have the difficult conversations that are often prevented by cultural institutions. So instead of focusing on what it would mean in this abstract notion of creating a culture that dealt with this, we can focus on our relationship skills, our communication skills, and our self-awareness practices in the moment. Because what happens? You create this culture and you try to tell everyone and teach everyone to live a certain way, and then what? Fucking change. Change happens, and change is happening faster and faster. Welcome to 2016. And all of cultures are there to try to slow and dampen the pace of change. And I think that option is becoming less and less available to us. And here we get to it, because the reason why I'm so fucking passionate about this, about the potential pitfalls of holding up either community or culture or something like that as an answer, is that I don't think it works. It is not the most efficient strategy to deal with change in the long term. I mean, my parents tried to indoctrinate us into radical leftist politics, and my brother became a Republican. I even said there was something I started calling San Francisco syndrome, where all of these mainly heterosexual white boys that I grew up with in the public school system in San Francisco, where they super politically correct policed us against saying anything homophobic, grew up to start saying things like, "You're a fag and not so gay," because they weren't given the opportunity to bring their whole selves in, because something was missed, because they were in an environment where they couldn't say something as simple as, "Hey, gay people make me uncomfortable." So that the same hard prejudices that would permit something like homophobia became the same hard prejudices preventing the real experience of those boys that felt uncomfortable around gay people. And the result was the same: rebellion and cycling. And maybe if they'd been able to bring in their uncomfortable feelings around homophobia in a way that was facilitated, they would have been able to work through it to find their own compassion. And then instead of transcribing a rule, the transmutation process of that uncomfortable feeling into something like compassion would have happened in the alchemical cauldron of those boys themselves, where they become the vessels of the forward momentum of consciousness, moving naturally towards that third thing, the transmutation of the polarization of againstness. That if we understand this dialectical pattern moving, then we can see that we grow most from encounter, that we grow at these edges where one thing meets another and a third thing is born. That this is how we move process, that this is how we evolve, so that we get to just keep on going round and around and around, and learning all the way, hopefully, better and better how to deal with the pace of change, how to deal with encountering each other, and how to deal with knowing and feeling ourselves. And to me, this fractal, globalized, ever-changing, ever-growing, ever-evolving journey of the self is one of the great joys of being alive at this time, and is so much more interesting and so much more exciting to me than any notion of prescribing culture or of creating nostalgic romanticized ideas of other cultures, or engaging in that whole matrix at all.